Same place the people in Russia looked, Samizdat. I mean, there's plenty of sources of information around. First of all, you can learn a lot in the press. You know, it's not a controlled press after all. And if you really read it carefully, you can learn a lot. For example, take, say, this thing I mentioned about the Senate vote. I mean, I don't know if it hit the press, but it was on the AP wires, so it's probably in the press somewhere or other. In fact, virtually everything I've described is somewhere in the press. You know, like if you take a look at the stuff about the health campaign. I mean, the fact that the majority of the population is opposed to the system that's being rammed down everyone's throat. Well, that's actually in the press. It's true, it's hidden in paragraph 93, but it's there, you know, and you can find it. So there's an awful lot you can find in the press. In fact, if you do what you really ought to do, start by reading every article from the end back to the front. You know, most of the lies are up in the front, and then as you get down to the story, you know, it turns out there's a lot of stuff back there. Apart from that, there's quite a range of other materials. I mean, from church sources, from dissident groups, from environmental groups, from, you know, all the activist groups around and so on. They all put out a ton of material, and much of it is very valuable. The thing about the Panama trial that I mentioned is there if you read the Central American press. It's in English, you know, it's too expensive to, you know, you can't subscribe to it unless you want to spend a couple $100, but a library could, probably isn't libraries. So there's plenty of sources of information. But the main answer to your question, I think, is that it doesn't matter how much information is around unless you have it accessible to you. And as an individual, you can't have it accessible unless you're an absolute fanatic. I mean, there are a small number of fanatics, I guess I'm one of them, who devote their lives to trying to do it out of some kind of insanity. But normal people can't do that. You have lives to lead, you know. You can't act like a fanatic. That's why people have organizations. Like I mentioned, churches in Kansas during the Nicaragua campaign. Well, you know, if you go down to those churches, people knew more about Nicaragua than the CIA, and knew more about El Salvador because they were working together, you know. And they had in fact, I learned a lot when I went to visit places like that, and I thought I was following it closely. If people work together, they can find out a lot of things, and they can furthermore they can gain understanding. You can't really have thought. You can't think independently if you're alone. I mean, anybody in the sciences knows this. Like in the natural sciences, you work together, you know. That's why you want to teach graduate courses, because the graduate students have all the smart ideas, and you interact and you figure things out. Anything where you're trying to really understand something is a collective activity of some kind. You try out ideas, and other people have them, and they react, and you know, somebody knows something you didn't know, and you put it together, and so on. And out of collective activity, you can find out a lot, but it requires organization. And in fact, the genius of American democracy has been to keep people very atomized. Well, I can tell you what I think is credible, but that's just believing what I think. There's no reason why you should believe that any more than you should believe anything else, you know? I mean, like, you know, I write in certain journals, and I think they're by and large credible, and I can tell you what I think they are, but my point is that there's absolutely no reason for you to trust my judgment. I mean, you know, why my judgment instead of some guy who edits the New York Times? You got to trust your own judgment, which means you have to look and see, you know? I mean, like, I write for Z magazine, and I think it's credible, but that's my judgment, you know, maybe not your judgment.